This is the Wing Woman Show. Are you ready? Thank you for listening to the Wing Woman Show. Today's guest is Jen Mcdonald, who is an incredible asset to our community here in Tampa. She's currently campaigning for District 1 Hillsborough County Commission. And on top of that, she's an extremely busy business owner. In the times of the coronavirus, which I'm sure has been very interesting. And she's extremely involved in our community, ranging from our local community college to her neighborhood association. Jen, thank you so much for joining us today, because I know this is an extremely busy time of year with the primaries right around the corner.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Morgan. I am happy to be here and spend some time with you. So thank you so much for the invitation.
Yeah, so walk me back to the very beginning. What even inspired you to pursue a career in insurance?
So I went to Temple University, and I was paying my way through school, getting really good grades because it was costing me personal money. So I was
Right.
very adamant that I would get good grades, and getting recruited for a lot of different business courses. So I was in the intro to business, like intro to finance, intro to accounting, intro to economics. And so those professors were recruiting me because I was getting A's in their coursework and asking a lot of questions and going to them with additional questions after class. And second semester, sophomore year, so spring of sophomore year, I was in intro to insurance. And all these other courses, I was actually like opening the textbook and having to do quite a bit of work to keep up and build my knowledge. And for whatever reason, in that class, in that insurance class, I was like third row, center, like right here, like looking the professor down the eyeballs, so I could pay attention and get good grades. And she and I started having a conversation. I would ask her a question and she would answer it, and then it would be part of like the course, right? And I didn't really notice that it had gotten into this pattern where in every class we were just having this dialogue back and forth. And I was reading the book, but I wasn't working super hard at it. It wasn't hard for me to do. And so my friends, after like 3 or 4 weeks in class, were like nudging me after class on the way out. And they're like, stop reading ahead in the book. Like, how do you know? And I'm like, I'm barely actually reading the book. I'm reading it, but it's not really, I'm like, I'm just asking the questions that are coming to me naturally. And I realized that there was something there that they weren't having. So I started helping them. And lo and behold, that professor and I became dear friends. She gave me a stipend and had me assist with her on research for one of her publications over spring break, which was a nice change because I was working in an office supply store in their coffee center, and I was going to be like doing double hours to try to get overtime over spring break to help pay off my car. And she actually was like, hey, I'll pay you a stipend. How much are they paying you? And I told her, and she's like, well, that's way less than I was going to pay you. And so she paid me a stipend. I spent the week doing research for her. I know, it was fantastic.
Yeah,
And I
that's the
realized
best
like
opportunity.
and research was like cool. So I enjoyed that. And then she and I, like I said, had a great friendship. She offered me to be her teacher's assistant for fall semester, but there were other plans in the works for both of us. She was sent to Tokyo to teach part of the trimester business executive program for Temple in Tokyo with the insurance piece. And so she shifted me over to work for the head of the department, the head of the insurance department at Temple University in the business school. And Professor Drennan required that I joined an organization called Gamma to be his teacher's assistant. So I did that and became a member and became very active in that. And I was his teacher's assistant for one whole semester. And then I went on to working in some other ways at the university and then independently. But yeah, it all came off of this like one little like just this thing that started to happen. It was so great, and I will always and forever be grateful to Professor Regan for her, for that opportunity she gave me. She saw something I didn't see in me at that time.
I know it. Well, and you were it sounds like you were just like Temple's go-to insurance gal already in college,
I was one of them. There were a lot of us out there.
Is insurance big there at Temple?
Yes, actually, we are a top-ranked program in the country, year in and year out. Our Gamma program tends to be one of the top one or top two programs in terms of business professional organizations across the country for insurance professionals. So yeah, we have a lot of great insurance professionals coming out of that. organization. And one of the things, actually funny, a lot of people don't know this, I have a dual major in business, risk management, insurance, and legal studies, because I was debating going to law school for law, do a law degree after college. And they always say double major because they play well on each other. And I play
Mm-hmm.
to what my strengths are, which is debate.
Right.
So
Yeah. So when you were originally going to Temple, did you know you wanted to do insurance or you thought you wanted to be a lawyer?
I actually didn't know what I was going to do at all. I got there. So my mom started college and then dropped out to have me. And my dad is a plumber, a union plumber. So he never
Mm-hmm.
went to college. And my dad has some siblings who were in the medical field and stuff like that
Mm-hmm.
who went to college. But I was really like kind of the first in my family to go through the college path. And so I was
Mm-hmm.
kind of carving my way. So I had no clue. I got there and I said, I'm going to do business because it's kind of math, and I'm kind of math and science brained. And so I thought this will be good because like the logic thing works in business, and I'll go that path. And then when I get there, I can sort it out and go from there. But I had no clue whatsoever what I was actually going to do with myself. And then I got there
Yeah.
and kind of found the path while I was there. So I
Yeah.
was very lucky to be where in the place I was at the time I was there.
Right. Yeah, I was a first generation college student too. So I always felt like I had similar feelings, like carving my path and finding my way throughout. I always knew I wanted to do something business related, but not like I had no idea beyond that. And kind of like found my way through college too.
Yeah, and
Um
my thing is like I love people, helping people, and
mhm,
so with insurance and risk management more so, you're thinking about all of these problems and kind of solving problems and helping people come to solutions that work really
right.
well for them. So it's an interesting kind of space, to use those
Yeah.
types of the things that draw me in.
Right, right. Especially like to hear the emotional side of you too, like how that community service aspect plays a part in your career. Because I think when people hear about insurance, they're kind of like I guess you never really know what to ask someone when they tell you, oh, I work in insurance, or like, oh, I work in accounting, like something like so professional like that. So it's good to hear like you still are able to incorporate like the community aspect of yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. That is a big part of who I am and how I
Mhm.
practice my insurance business as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think for people who know you in real life in Tampa, like you are so involved in every organization. If there's an event, you're probably there. I don't know how you're able to ever come home and let your two little cute dogs out because you're always so involved everywhere and you're just such an incredible community asset. What brought you down here to Tampa after college?
Yeah, so I took an internship between my fourth and fifth year of college in Dallas, Texas. And being from Philadelphia, sports wise, kind of the enemy, so my dad was not totally thrilled. Um, but I had this like fantastic summer. I stayed with one of my professor's mom. Actually lived in Dallas. He was from out there, and he recommended I spend some time with her before I found my place to stay. And then I ended up spending the summer with this woman. She's still close to me, and I adore her. But but I was out there in Texas, and I realized from the difference between Texas and like the Northeast, how different people were, how they lived differently, how life was different.
Hmm.
And they sent me to St. Louis and Kansas City over that summer to also assist with those offices for a couple weeks too. And same thing, it was like totally different from Texas. And I realized in that summer how little I knew about the country, the United States.
Mhm.
Um, and fortunately for me, also the woman I lived with had traveled all over the world by herself. Her husband didn't love to travel, so she was an
Oh my
independent woman who had traveled.
gosh.
I know. She was a baller. I love this woman. She and I, when we got together, I was like, oh boy, we are dynamic duo here. Um, we had a great summer together. She taught me about a lot of things, and she had friends calling from all over the world at different hours of the day and night, and she would call me into her little lounge area in her room to come sit on one of the couches, and she would put her phone, because we didn't have cell phones with speaker, but she would put her phone from the wall on the table and put it on speaker, and her and I would have these dialogues with all of these folks from all over the world. So it
Wow.
was like my experience was like I don't know anything about the US or the world in terms of like people and how they live and what different culturally we look like. besides what I know from folks that I'm friends with throughout the Northeast
Mm-hmm.
area of the United States. And so I was like, I'm moving away. And I actually rejected a bunch of job offers and got into a lot of trouble with the head of the department who I had worked for a couple years
Right.
earlier. We were dear friends. It was actually his mom that I was living with. And so we were dear friends, but we could not work together, and we knew that. So so he was very mad because he got the calls that I was like rejecting these really good
Mm-hmm.
job offers in the Northeast. And I told him, I said, I'm moving away. Whether you all help me do that or whether I go do that on my own, I'm moving away. I need
Yeah,
to go
good for
somewhere.
you.
Yeah, I knew that I needed that release in my life and that change. And then Travelers came back to me and said, we'll let you interview in either Denver, Colorado or Tampa, Florida. And I'm like, I am so over. It was a cold winter that year. I was like, I'm so
Mm.
over snow boots.
It was not
And I
happening.
interviewed down here. They made me the job offer. I was like signing the
You
document as the paper was printing out of the printer. I didn't care what they had offered. I was like, get me out of here. I'm doing it. And so I came down here thinking this will be like 3 to 5 years. I'll get to know the company. Maybe I'll take another job with them somewhere else.
mm-hmm.
I'll keep my moving around and kind of growing and learning and seeing this country. And then I got here, and you can't pry me out of this town.
I
They tried. I was like, no. And my job moved out of state, and I decided that, you know what, I've always thought about starting my own business. My grandfather was a small business owner. Now my uncle is. And so I had that entrepreneurial kind of around me a little
Mhm.
bit, but also like I felt this need to do this thing. And so I had, they were moving my job out of state, and they were like trying to convince me to go. And I took the severance,
And it was
and I took some time, and I set up my business, and I launched like from nothing. And I had no idea at that time how to market, how to build a business. I had Merchant, which is my good friend and her mom. They own Merchant, but my entity does business with Merchant and through Merchant. And I had to like kind of launch that. Now she was there to help coach me, but she grew her business in a totally different pattern than how
mm-hmm.
I grow mine. So it was an interesting learning curve of several years of hard work and struggle.
Yeah. So how many years post college was that when you started?
So I started this business in 2013. So I'm at the 7-year mark on my business.
Wow, congratulations. And
Yeah.
on top of how involved you are in the community, like I feel like your involvement is just a full-time job in itself.
Yeah.
On top of like running a business. So that is huge. I'm so curious when it came to launching your campaign, like was there a moment where you're like, "Oh, I need to do this," or did it like slowly build for you?
So it's kind of the combination, right? They say like there are overnight successes or overnight like
Mhm.
epiphanies. So I had been involved in so many different things, and when I started the insurance business, I kind of made this arrangement with myself that my inner child could run my calendar. So I was going to participate in anything I have an interest. I don't care. I'll figure out how to pay for it. I'm going to
Mhm.
figure it out, and I'll grow this business, and I'll also build out and do these things. I'm a very curious human.
I love
Um,
that. I love that because that's the exact opposite of like what most people do. And I feel like that's why they get so bored and like they feel so dull up towards their career paths. So I
yeah.
love that you do that.
Thank you. Yeah, and so I mean, and everybody was like, "What are you doing? And why are you over here?" I was like in every direction, right? Like going to TBAEP, which is the environmental professionals, and learning about seagrass in the bay. And I was going, it was just like in every
Yeah.
direction, you know. And so I just I became involved in my neighborhood association right around the launch of the new business, and
Mhm.
sort of like spent a lot of time there and ran some committees for the organization, and got asked to be president. In my life, it wasn't a good time, and then got asked again, and I was like, well, it's a slightly less bad time for me to take on this type of responsibility. And so I was like, you know what, I'll do it. I'll commit to the thing, and I'll do it because I cared a lot about what was happening in the
Right.
neighborhood. And at that same time, I ended up doing like Mayor's Neighborhood University,
Mhm.
the Citizens Police Academy, the Tampa Fire Rescue's Fire Academy, like all because I was all around that like neighborhood organization stuff, and
Mhm.
growing my knowledge there, and letting my inner child say, "Oh, we can go play with a fire hose and hang
Yeah.
out on a fire truck." It's kind of cool. So So I was doing all these things and learning, and two city councilmen whose terms were about to be up just kind of started mentoring me around the questions I was asking them, but also like talking more. Like we would sit and have coffee, and they would block off an hour or more, and we would just sit there and talk not just about the things that I was asking about in terms of association, but then they would talk about what it was like to run and what it was like to be elected. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. So I took some courses with a women's organization a couple years earlier, and I had been still in contact with them and sort of like supporting some of the women they were running for office. And I said, okay, well, maybe I'll look at running for something. Like maybe I can do better in some of these things. And I really think other folks these decisions are making. So great. And then in 2018, there was an interesting thing happening, District 1. Our commissioner, Sandy Merman, had decided to file to run for a countywide seat, and she had raised a bunch of money. So it looked like she was going to run in that race. And Janet Cruz was in District 1, filed to run for District 1, expecting a special election. April of that year, my phone rings, and it's the Democratic Party. Janet Cruz is going to go run for Senate, and we need somebody to run for District 1, County Commission, and we know that you are kind of teetering with the idea of running for something, and your background and the things that you've done, you are ready, you are prepared, you can do this, will you run? And I said,
wow.
Whoa.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm going to need to think about that. I'm going to need a couple of days. Let me think about it. And they said, well, don't make any decisions. You know, I was kind of like, this is way big. This is a way big run, right? 207,000 voter. It's a big district. And so, I mean, there are state house seats that are not the size of these district seats, these county commission seats. So it's a big district. And the volume of work that county commission does, land use, zoning, economic development, environmental protection, the transportation, we have a healthcare plan, there's just so many things. And so I wanted to like step back and really understand it. So I made phone calls to current electeds, former electeds, people who knew me really well in terms of like my deliverable and how I grow and evolve and how I would manage this. And I just said, like, what do y'all think? And they're like, oh yeah, this is it. It moves. Because county commission, I tell people it's like a web, right? And you can't pull too hard on one end without really having a big impact on the other end. So you have to be watching a lot of things happen at once. And you have to be like all eyes on everything. And that's a lot like risk management and insurance. So the way I think and see things naturally fits this type of a job. And so people are like, no, this is actually like really, man, they really picked a good one here. And so I accepted the call to run, got in the race, raised a bunch of money, and then on the Friday before, 10 days before the qualifying deadline, Sandy Merman would have had to resign from county commission and then and notify the commission that she was doing so that she could run. So she could officially get into that race, be running. And on that Friday at 5:01, my phone rang. And I'm like, I think I know this phone number because I've received a call or two from it. And I look at it and I was like, okay, what does this mean? I answered the phone and it was the newspaper. It was Wendy March from the newspaper saying, hey, Jen, Sandy's not running for County Commission District 7 or whatever district she was going to run for against him. So what are you going to do now? And I'm like, I'm going to take the weekend off and think about this one. It's a big deal.
Yeah.
And
so at that point, you still didn't make a decision yet?
So I was already in the race running and had raised money, but the special election wasn't going to trigger. So now my race is 2020, which I'm in right now. So at this point, it was 2020 and I said, I almost I was really close to saying, Wendy, this is where I want to serve. This is my community. I really think I have what it takes for this job, and I really think this is the right place. I think I'm going to sit still for two years, raise some money, and run this race. But I was a brand new candidate 2 months in, never, you know, a year earlier, I probably would have said, no, I'm not running for elected office. And so I was in a totally different position in my life, and I go, you know what, I'm going to take the weekend and think about it. And by Monday, I was like, yeah,
you knew, yeah.
I'm staying put. I'm going to wait for this race to happen. I'm not going to go play, you know, I want to be elected somewhere for any reason. I'm here for a specific reason to run. So yeah. So that's kind of how it played out. It's intense. And 2 years later, I'm like less than a week out from a primary. Kind of excited and kind of nervous, you know?
Yeah, so you're excited though, right? Like I can't, like, it's actually like finally here. I'm sure that's what it kind of feels like. Like it's like finally actually here.
Yeah. You remember the first time you rode a roller coaster and you're strapped in and you're waiting, waiting, waiting for the thing to start moving, and then it starts moving and it's like inching up that hill, right? I'm inching up the hill, and like any second now we're going off, and it's like, phew,
Yeah.
that's where I'm at. I'm just sitting there going, okay, it's, and the hill is like all this work. When you think about it, I'm like Fred
Right.
Flintstone pedaling my way to the top of the hill though.
So, well, like running a campaign, like that's a huge, there's so many elements to take on. Like the fundraising in itself, especially for such a large district.
Yeah.
Like, how did you tackle that, the fundraising aspect? Because even though your inner child was kind of like allowing you to pick all these different things, like there's still a huge monetary commitment
Yes.
to running a campaign.
And remember, my inner child had the responsibility 7 years ago. She's kind of been curtailed just like a little bit. She still has some run, but not full run.
Right.
So really what happened was, when I launched the campaign, you take a list of everybody you've ever met, right? And so like
Mm-hmm.
I have like a list of like 3 or 4 thousand people that I had met in the course of like the 5 years up until the launch time from when I launched my
Right.
business, plus my family and friends and
Mm-hmm.
people like that who are like already like stored in my phone and on a regular basis. So that's a lot of people to call. So you start your call list and you just start dialing down the list like 1, 2 all day long, for hours a day, and you talk to people and you talk about why you're running, and and then there's surprising things, like there's surprising things of people who are just like, yeah, here, let me write you a check, how much? And I'm like, okay. And then there's like, your family member who you think is going to be super supportive but doesn't get it. Like my dad, when I called him on call time first time, it was hard. He gave me the runaround, and he's like, but I don't live in your district, Jennifer. And like, luckily his wife was standing there and heard the whole conversation. But I was so frustrated because I'm like, Dad, you can't even like give me $100 towards my campaign. Like, don't you believe in me? Like, do you not believe that I'm going to do
Yeah.
a good job for my community? He's like, you will, but it's not my community. I'm like, but I'm your daughter. Like, and
Yeah.
afterwards his wife was like, if she called you asking for $100 because she needed something for her, like for her bike, to buy something to be part of a bicycle team, would you give her $100? And he's like, yeah, of course. She's like, so
Right.
my dad called me back an hour later and was like, I am not really good at this politics thing, and I didn't realize that it was just about me supporting you, and I'm going to give you $500 to your campaign. And I was like, oh wow, for him that's a lot of money. So I'm like, thank you, that was a big donation. But it
Mhm.
was one of those things where like you don't realize, like, you learn really quickly the nuances of like where people are on this, and also like, there are folks who are like, hey, I'm all in because I think you're great, and then there's other people who are like, I think you're great, but I'm not big on doing the politics thing, and so it's kind of balancing all of that sort of stuff. But yes,
Mhm.
it's straight up hours on the phone. Thousands and thousands of phone calls have been made. I have some incredible people. I've been really, really lucky in life that I don't know how I've done it, but I always find myself surrounded by these just the most incredible human beings. And I've
Mhm.
been so lucky. And they've all stepped up and they've been supportive and they're stoked. And everybody's disappointed that we're not having like this great big huge party next
Right.
week, because they're like, win or lose, they want to celebrate all of the work that we've done together, the volunteer time, the money, the efforts that they put in on their end, the things that I've been doing for the last year. And so
Mhm.
that is like a challenge of COVID, is like, man, we just really want to
Right.
get together and see each other, and that's hard. But yeah, no, it's incredible, like building out that call list and
Mhm.
calling people and not being shy. And it's really about not being shy, Morgan.
Yeah,
Like
well,
that.
what about, like, being disheartened? So, like, when you call your dad and, like, your dad is hesitant to even donate, and I'm sure he's one of the first ones you made because 'cause you're like, "Oh, this is gonna be great practice." So how do you keep yourself going even when you have, like, maybe close friends who didn't even donate and you're thinking, does she believe in me? Or, like, am I doing something wrong?"
Well, and I think it's interesting because like even with my dad, at first I was like frustrated, so I was like, I'm gonna get up and like walk away from my computer and take a breather. And I walked
Mhm.
back to my computer afterwards, like after my little breather, and I was like, you know what? In my head, I'm like, you just didn't convey to him like what it meant to you for him, for his donation, whatever it was going to be, to mean from your, like, for your dad. And that's a communication issue between my dad and I, to be
Mm-hmm.
to be honest. Um, but with other folks, it's really about, when I call and ask, it's the onus is on me to make the ask. And then once I've done that, it's your thing. It's your decision. So I don't even think about it as personal at all from
Mm-hmm.
anybody else really, besides my dad. I wouldn't think
Right.
about it as a personal situation. And so I look at it as, I'm going to make the ask. And if you're able, like, fantastic. And if you're not able, well, that's perfectly fine. I mean, I've had people who are like dear friends with my opponent who are like, I'm really good friends with your opponent. And I'm like, that's okay. I'm like, it doesn't mean you don't think I'm going to be a good candidate. And they're like, oh, I think you're going to be a fabulous candidate, but I'm not giving you any money until you get through this primary. And they're like,
Yeah.
so it's when you're sitting on this side of it, you have to remember that you're carrying your thing into every call, whatever it is. For me, it's just, I'm here to run and I'm here to serve. And they're carrying their thing into answering that call and how they answer it, whether they choose to or not. And both, it's okay. It's okay to be
Mm-hmm.
there. So I think people are shocked to hear that I'm kind of like, I say I'm the queen of rejection. I get rejected like 100 times a day. And that was before I started running for office.
How have
As
you
an
always been like that? Like, were you ever like sensitive when it came to rejection? You were.
Yeah, yeah, but I mean, I'm an insurance agent. I talk to, you will learn really fast that you have to shake, 100 hands to get 10 calls, to get 3 meetings, to
Mm-hmm.
get one new client, right? So if that's where you are in, like, understanding that not everybody's going to be for you. I don't know why or how. Somewhere in my 20s and early 30s, I learned this thing, and I said it to somebody once, and they were like, you're really smart for your age. I said, you know what? I'm not for everybody, right? Not
Mm-hmm.
everybody's gonna like me. They aren't, and that is okay. That is perfectly okay. I'm also not gonna force that person to have to deal with me, and I'm just
Mm-hmm.
gonna keep moving. And so once I got to that place where I understood, like, it's okay that some people and you are just not gonna always mesh or not gonna get along, and it's not about you and it's not about them. It's just that you're just not meshing. It's like suddenly all of the no's are like, okay, no big deal, keep going. And I just literally, like, when I my campaign, I have a volunteer who helps a lot with my campaign. He says, if I can get you on the phone at 10 a.m., I know when I call you at 6 p.m., you're still on the phone. Because that's how I get. I just get on the phone, I start dialing and talking
Right.
to people and leaving messages, and it's just all day. And it doesn't bother me a lick, one way or the other. With if people give or don't give, it doesn't make me. And I just don't focus on the no's. Every time somebody gives $100, I'm like, woohoo! And I'm like, I get jazzed up and I keep going, keep calling. So I think it's like how it's a perception thing, right? Like, if you don't worry about perceiving what their thing means and just say, oh, okay, that's what it is, and you just move on and
Mm-hmm.
you don't try to,
Mm-hmm.
it's okay, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
I guess I don't know how that translates, but
Yeah,
it's like
just
a,
taking it at face value and like not reading deep into it and like
yeah,
what it could secretly mean.
yeah, who
Yeah.
cares?
Right, I
Right?
know.
Like, if somebody secretly, like, hates your guts, like, why do you even care?
Right. I mean, that is true. That is a great outlook to have, especially running a campaign.
Well, and
Um
especially if you haven't done anything particularly, like,
mhm,
to warrant something like that, right? I mean, if you've done something and you've wronged somebody, like, fix it. But if they just don't like you,
right.
they're
Then
not gonna change it. I'm
right.
not changing, so they're not gonna like me later.
So, let me just make sure. Okay, so one main thing that I really want to get into is, so obviously with the coronavirus, like, it shifted everything. Everything's virtual, everything's online. And like, as I was scrolling through your Facebook, you have all these like some interviews collaborating with other people, which I feel like is very unique for like a campaign.
Mhm.
Because a couple of candidates I saw have done similar things, but nothing like yours. So what
Yeah.
kind of other changes did you make when the coronavirus came on that
Yeah.
kind of like added your personality to your campaign?
So, interesting, a year and a half ago, I was nervous in front of the camera. And I started doing Facebook Lives. I was in this thing called Backstage Pass, where you go behind the scenes and meet all the departments within
Mm-hmm.
the county. And every time I'd go, it was once every other week. Every time I would go after the class, I would video with somebody and have like a little interview so I could get less nervous in front of the camera, but
Yeah.
also so I could share out to the community, like, hey, here's what's available in Hillsborough County. Here's what we're doing. And so I started doing that, and over that course of the year, I built a skill that I knew I didn't have, and kind of didn't realize I actually developed it to the point that I am. But then Corona hit, and everybody was like calling me, right? Like when you're the person that everybody calls to say, hey, who are you voting for? Hey, what does this thing mean that the government's
Mm-hmm.
doing? Hey, what is this coronavirus thing that I see on TV that people are talking about, but nobody's telling me? That I said, oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
I was just
Mm-hmm.
at Gasparilla Music Festival the weekend before. I was like, oh,
Oh
how
God.
bad am I? What kind of trouble am I in? And so I started calling my girlfriends. I said, who knows anybody who's like good with infectious disease? And 4 people gave me the same name. And so I called this woman, Catherine Hogue Telford. She's a doctor, a local pediatrician. And I said, hey, I've been given your name by like 4 people. And she warned me that a couple of them had told her I was going to end up calling her because they figured. And she said, I said, what is the deal? What do you know about coronavirus? And she goes, oh, well, interesting. You should ask. I did 2 extra years of pediatric etymology, the study of the infectious disease, pediatric infectious disease and etymology of disease and whatnot. And I was like, oh, this is the girl. This is the woman, right? So, so I asked her a bunch of questions, and we went back and forth, and we realized like we were on the same page with a lot of things, in the fact that people were calling her as well. And I was like, well, how do we slow down the inbound phone calls but get the information out? And I go, oh, why don't we do a Facebook Live? And she agreed. And on St. Patrick's Day, the 17th of March, I was in her office, and we did a live. We did a little bit of social distancing there. We were probably like 3 or 4 feet apart because we weren't quite understanding
Mm-hmm.
all the
Oh yeah, you
magnitude
did
of
not know
everything.
back then. Yeah.
And so I was in her office, and we did this, like, what is flattening the curve? You could see her drawing the graph on the wall and everything. And in the video, I put like a little bit of money behind it to give it a boost, just to kind of get the info out further. And I
Mm-hmm.
picked the campaign page because I'm like, oh, I have some campaign money I'm supposed to be sending in social media. This is good social media info, and this is good info for the community. So here's where I'll do it. And I sent it out, and I had like 9,000 views in like 3 weeks. By the Sunday, that Sunday, we decided to go live with how to quarantine at home, why safer at home was a thing, and we did a whole series on like the things you should have, and just based off of what we knew at the time, right? Because this was an
Mm-hmm.
emerging situation, and it had nothing to do with I'm going to use this to run for office. It was more about like, here's a platform that
Right.
I have a lot of followers. How do I get the info to as many people as possible? Well, it turned out that people love those videos. And as everything evolved in my life, I realized, oh, taxes aren't due. And I was on the phone with my accountant. I go, well, would you want to do a Facebook Live? And then my friend was talking about the CARES Act, and I asked her, I'm like, would you do a Facebook Live? And all of a sudden, it was all these folks, because there was so much evolution happening on what was coming out of the
Mm-hmm.
federal government, how people were able to interact, what was evolving, and the info had to get out there fast. And I just didn't see it coming through the news media. My TV's up over
Right.
my shoulder.
You did.
And so I was like, well, let's just do this thing. Like, I can't do what I used to do, which was I would go into 100 rooms in a month and share info and spread
Mm-hmm.
info with people that way. And we would kind of get stuff out into the community. Let me do it on the Facebook. And it was, I mean, I love it. I have another one filmed that I forgot I have to put out there still, but I love doing it. The only thing that stopped it was just like the main launch of like what has to be done for campaigning right now took
Right.
over.
Yeah.
And we'll probably continue them through the fall, to be honest, because they were
Mm-hmm.
fun. I enjoyed it. But in addition, one other thing we did, we could not do any door knocking, no canvassing.
Right. Right.
So all of my volunteers who were going to door knock started doing call time. We gave them a dedicated list, a script, and another document with a bunch of information. We had people doing wellness checks in the community. So they were calling folks who were in the higher risk category. Like we would do some baseline, that we knew that people over the age of 60 were kind of in a higher risk category.
Right.
So we were reaching out to folks in that community saying, hey, this is the Jen Mcdonald campaign. We're calling to see if you have the resources you need. Do you have access to food? Do you have access to like medical supplies? Do you have access to, like,
Wow.
making sure people had what they needed? Because I realized that these were the calls I was also now getting, was like, how do I get this? Or where do I get tested?
Mm.
And so we had a whole list of where you could get these things handled, folks who could help them. And my call team would just give that information out. So we, busy hands, right? Like, you're just staying busy and intentional and helping people, which has been
Right.
my whole life. That's the kind of who I
Yeah.
am. So yeah.
Well, how thoughtful of you to check in with everyone, because it still does kind of like keep you top of mind, but in a way that is serving,
Yep.
like our community and our district. I feel like almost like moving your campaign virtual, especially since our district, Hillsborough, is like kind of spread out with a bunch of people.
Mhm.
Has it almost been more beneficial to go more virtual than it would be knocking door to door?
It's interesting. I can reach more people through social media than I can reach knocking doors in a day, right?
Mhm.
It is way more personal. I love canvassing. I've canvassed for other candidates and I love it. I love it because every 3 or 4 doors somebody's offering me cookies.
Oh my gosh.
and like and to come into the air conditioning out of the heat and to hang out and talk with them, and maybe half of those I take up on their offer. So
Yeah.
it's just like a smorgasbord of like good information, good conversations, and delicious
Right.
snacks. So, well, I mean, like, I love that. I don't know who doesn't like it. So I miss that part. I really do. It makes me sad to think that piece of my campaign has been kind of taken away by this, because it's such a part of me. But it
Mhm.
taught me that I have other ways to shine that I had no idea I was going to be good at, right? Like the
Mhm.
interviews, and like where I even thought, like, let's do this wellness check. Like on the day it came to my mind, I'm like, oh, I wrote down wellness check on my notepad, like while I was doing some other things. And then I was like, oh yeah, I need to start calling people and doing this. What a good idea. And it just kind of like came out of nowhere. I wouldn't have been able to learn so much, without this. And what's interesting is I've learned and grown, right? I've learned, one, how to do Facebook Lives effectively, use an app called Be
Mhm.
Live, which is no longer
Yes.
was no longer working for me, so that I don't use anymore.
I know
Then
it stopped working for me too.
yeah, I don't know what happened. They did some upgrade and it went
I know.
downhill. So, and then I evolved to using Zooms, understanding how people are connecting and realizing nobody watches you live. I had like 3
Mhm.
looks on my lives. But then once you get it up there, people watch in their own time
Right.
frame. So knowing that was part of the dynamic. I learned how to pull a sound clip and turn it into an MP4, an MP3, whatever it needs to be, and then get that up on Facebook, because I had an interview on the radio, and I was like, well, how do I get that out of the radio and onto Facebook so people can hear it? And so, like, this whole time, it's been like playtime, right? Like, I still have to run my business, I still have
Right.
to communicate with people, but it's basically like, let's learn how to do all these new things for like 5 months.
Yeah.
And it's been so fun. I have had the most fun doing these evolutions, because a curious mind, right? Like when you have a curious
Mhm.
mind, a new thing is cool, you know?
Oh, yeah. So how has your personal brand that you've been building through your campaign impacted your business?
So right now my campaign's taken over. I have a couple really key clients that I'm working on for renewals. But it's interesting because I think it's more that my business has impacted my campaign. Being in insurance and having all of the experiences I had along the way, from
Mhm.
learning the risk management mindset to being an underwriter. I actually spent a couple years, after underwriting, transitioning out onto a sales team, and so I did a couple years on an inside sales team where I had established relationships and I was doing phone calls with them instead of driving around to visit them because they were spread
Mhm.
out. And so call time, right? Like a natural transition to call time is having that skill. And so even though like the brand is, it is me, it, it's not that the campaign is driving the business. It's that like me and like the business have set me up to actually run this campaign. And I think it's really like kind of who I am plays into this, but I think we'll see how things continue. I mean, I don't know how to say it. The brand was already kind of established.
Mhm.
And so the campaign is just continuation of the brand in a different energy, but kind of the continuation of the brand. So I haven't really seen how it's impacting the business so much as how much the business has
Right, has
impacted me.
impacted your campaign. So tell us where we can find you, where we can support you. I'm gonna link it down below so that everyone
Okay.
can click on it too.
Yeah.
But I guess we'll follow you on Facebook because that's your favorite platform, right?
Facebook is my favorite platform. At some point, I'm gonna get like really good at Instagram, but I'm just not there yet. So Facebook, it's just Jen McDonald on Facebook. It's this space, really easy. And then I'm not one of those people who puts my dogs as my profile picture because even though they're adorable,
They
I
are.
like that's too much. And then so Jen McDonald for Hillsborough County Commission District 1 is my campaign Facebook page. My personal one is the Jen McDonald, and you'll be able to find me. And then same thing, LinkedIn is Jen McDonald on LinkedIn. My campaign website is votejenmcdonald.com. And those are the best ways to kind of get in touch with me or find me. Yeah, or talk to Morgan. She can connect you
Yeah.
really easy.
Well, thank you so much, Jen.